Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint by Sing Shong. Chapter 420. The Secret of Plotter. Part 5. Final scenario? Zhang Huiwen frowned deeply while staring at the blinking message in the air. The final scenario was already starting? The Apocalypse Dragon scenario was supposed to be 89th. So, did this mean that the 90th scenario was the last? It wasn't just her who was confused by this, though. Every constellation still riding on the ark exchanged glances and began murmuring among themselves. What does that even mean? Wait, did the 99th scenario start already? Some of them even began lodging complaints to Dakibi Baihyang, too. What kind of an underhanded scheme is this? It's not the time for the final scenario to start. Are you planning to take Kim Dokja Company away separately? Baihyang studied the reactions of these constellations before shaking his head. The invitations to the final scenario are being issued since from a while ago. More correctly, ever since all of you decided to wake the Apocalypse Dragon, that is. His declaration caused the constellations to become noisy among themselves. A few of them seemed to have realized something, and while looking around the vicinity in worried eyes, began shouting out loudly. In that case, send us to the final scenario, too. That's right. We also possess the qualifications. Baihyang spoke as if to pacify them. I'm sorry, but I'm not in charge of you, everyone. But, if you possess the requisite qualifications, then the assigned Akibis will arrive soon to guide you, so please rest easy. However, his tone of voice was definitely not a friendly one. That is, as long as you are qualified, of course. Complexions of the constellations paled visibly. And soon afterwards, the Ark made another announcement. Next stop is the 8612th planetary system. The 8612th planetary system. Where the planet Earth was, the home to Kim Dokja Company. Baihyang shifted his gaze over the members of Kim Dokja Company as if he could no longer delay the matter. Well, now. Everyone from Kim Dokja Company, please gather around. That prompted Han Suyang to step forward. No, hang on a minute. We finished the last scenario only a few days ago, you know? Please let us head over to Earth first. We haven't completed our preparation for the next scenario yet. Zhang Huiwen also pitched in. One by one, the comrades gathered around Xin Yusung, Yi Gilyong, and Yi Jihai, too. They all carried confused, unsettled expressions. Baihyang sighed softly under his breath. As I thought, it's really inconvenient without Kim Dokja around, isn't it? If only he was here, he'd have understood it already. Just what's the reason for hurrying us up like this? If you can't give us a proper explainer. Baihyang's lips quietly moved. There aren't that many entry tickets remaining. You gotta go there as soon as possible to secure yours. Those words were conveyed through the Dakibi communication. The members of the Kim Dokja Company looked at each other at the same time. If this Dakibi was sending a covert message like this, it could only mean that he didn't want other constellations to hear him. However, what was with this entry ticket thing? Did they need such a thing for the next scenario? Yu Yonghyuk suddenly made his entrance from behind the hesitating group. Let's get going. But, hang on. Yu Yonghyuk remained adamant even when Zhang Huiwen tried to stop him. The final scenario won't start just because we enter its location. It's the right decision to heed his recommendation. But, what about Hyansong SSI, entrust him to my master. Zhang Huiwen hurriedly looked at Han Suyang. The latter seemed to be thinking about something for a bit and then grabbed the former's shoulder. For the time being, let's go there. There must be a reason if he's being so insistent like this. Maybe, Kim Dokja might have gone ahead of us and is waiting there. It's worth checking it out. The words, Kim Dokja, brought about resolute determination on the members' expressions. I agree. Me too. Me too. Xin Yusung, Yi Gilyong, and even Yi Jihai all quickly made up their minds. Zhang Huiwen seemed to be worried about Yi Hyansong until the end, but eventually nodded her head after listening to Yu Young-hyuk's words. We might be able to find a way to revive the Emperor of Steelsword sooner by going to the final scenario's location. In that case, I don't have a reason to hesitate anymore. Well, let's get going, then. Along with Baehyung's voice, Kim Dokja Company's surroundings were dyed in bright light in an instant. Scenario transmission is starting. Perhaps due to the higher-ranking Dakibi's authority being invoked, the time it took to move through the portal was short and comfortable. In the blink of an eye, the group found themselves transported to the middle of pitch-black outer space. More specifically, on top of a semi-transparent disk that allowed them to look down on the universe itself. Where? The disk was protected by a dome-shaped barrier with only one entrance/exit, while there were several Dakibis standing in front of this very doorway. Yu Young-hyuk took a look at the Dakibis once, and then at the doorway, before muttering to himself. It's the gate of Starstream. You know where this is? He nodded his head at Han Soo-young's question. It's where the Bureau's headquarters is. You have to pass through here in order to enter the final scenario's location. Sounds like you've been here before? Were you caught by the probability appropriateness evaluation or something? No, it's my first time here. Then how did you know? Did the records from the 1863rd turn mention this place? That is. Suddenly, he grabbed his temples and staggered unsteadily. He knew of the records from the 1863rd turn, thanks to the secretive plotter. However, those records didn't contain any information regarding this scenario. Kim Dokja hadn't said anything in particular, either. In that case, how did he know of this information already? Suchachit. Sparks faintly danced just above his coat. Ji-hai sensed that something was wrong, and as she reached out to him, rays of bright light exploded from the gate's vicinity. Another batch of constellations, as well as Dakibis, warped into this place. Constellation Nims, please, it's this way. Constellations and incarnations brushed past their group in perfect order under the guidance of great Dakibis. And among them walking past Kim Dokja Company was Heech, the very same Dakibi who showed up to offer them a choice earlier. Didn't I say it before? That you'll all regret your decision. Han Soo-young and Yu Young-hyuk glanced at each other after hearing that great Dakibi's passing voice. Something was off about this whole thing. Quite unlike this great Dakibi's group that went past the gate rather easily, Kim Dokja Company wasn't even able to approach its vicinity at all. Baehyung was standing by the entrance, and the group could hear him arguing with the gatekeepers there. What is the meaning of this? We've already gone through all the procedures. These incarnations possess the right qualifications to enter the final scenario. So, please step aside. As the gate emitting pure light swallowed up the great Dakibi's group, it stopped first and whispered something to the captain of the gatekeepers. Unable to wait any longer, Baehyung stepped forward, only for this captain to open its lips. Higher-ranking Dakibi Baehyung, you and Kim Dokja Company can't enter the final scenario. Asterisk. When I was young, I often had dreams where I became Yu Young-hyuk. Well, he occupied the places inside me that should have been filled by the likes of Superman or Batman, that was why. Not only that, I often acted as him even when I was wide awake. I got beaten up because of that, and also experienced some pretty horrible ordeals, too. Even then, I managed to survive until now, because I became such a Yu Young-hyuk. Captain, let's hurry and head over to the next scenario. Of course, it wasn't only Yu Young-hyuk who made an appearance in my dreams. Indeed, the brave Ji-hai was there, too. And maintenance of the equipment is complete, Young-hyuk SSI. The dependable Lee Hyun-sung was also there, and finally. Captain, are you alright? Your complexion isn't so good. The thoughtful Shin Yu-sung was there, too. In a way, they were like my family. If Yu Young-hyuk was my parent, then Lee Hyun-sung was my older brother, Ji-hai was my older sister, and Yu-sung was my friend. I loved their stories. I cheered them on during their fights, and took a peek at their misfortunes. And I I wasn't really sure if this could serve as an excuse, but I truly wished for them to be happy. What had happened to them by now, I wonder? The last thing I saw was Yu Young-hyuk's face. It's all because of you. Suddenly, my view spun around. I spat out a pained groan and opened my eyes. Your complexion isn't so good. Are you all right? I was wondering why my chest felt heavy, but as it turned out, the Koma Yu Young-hyuk number, 999, was standing on it. He used his mini, heaven-shaking sword to pick up a cup resting on the nearby table and handed it over to me. Drink. Thanks. My mind gradually woke up after drinking some cold water. Current incarnation body recovery rate, 36%. Although negligent, my incarnation body was slowly recovering. Of course, it wasn't enough to make me feel satisfied. Kim Dokja Company. It's now time to leave for the final scenario. The site I saw in 666, a smartphone last night, didn't want to leave my head. My companions were already facing the offer of the final scenario. I no longer had time to waste here. You can leave whenever you want. As long as you can figure out the answer yourself, that is. It's that thing again? I grumbled unhappily and sat up, but then, the Koma Yu Young-hyuk number, 999, threw an unexpected question in my way. Name the type of food you hate. Why, all of a sudden? Shut up and answer the question. I was momentarily overwhelmed by the little guy's force. It's tomato. He pulled out a small memo pad from his inner pocket and jotted down tomato in neat handwriting. Why was he writing that down, anyway? What about your favorite food? Miram dumplings with chicken broth. My answer prompted a change of expressions in 999's face. Looks like your tongue knows its stuff. Well, sure, my 3-inch tongue helped me live this far, that's true. 81st Turn is in charge of cooking. His swordsmanship might be lacking, but he's quite talented when it comes to making food. Look forward to it. Now that I thought about it, 81st Turn Yu Young-hyuk learned quite a lot of cooking skills for some reason, didn't he? It seemed that he was in charge of meals in this place, then. 999, finished jotting down on the memo, jumped off from the bed and glanced back at me. If you're uncomfortable about something, tell me. Even a dumb guest is a guest nonetheless. There is something I want to ask, actually. As long as it's not an unnecessary one. Why did Yu Young-hyuk become an outer god? The Koma Yu Young-hyuk's expression hardened ever so slightly. I continued with my questioning. Not only that, he even acts as a constellation with a moniker of secretive plotter, too. The Yu Young-hyuk that I know of would have never done something like this. One of the things I realized after coming here was that almost all the Koma Yu Young-hyuks didn't really like me. Quite often, they would try to pick a fight with me for no reason, and rarely did they provide a proper answer whenever I asked them about something. However, this, 999, was different. There was that story about the wolf, too. It was as if he wanted to tell me something here. Thankfully, my gut feeling wasn't wrong. Just what is the Yu Young-hyuk you think you know? His voice contained faint traces of scorn. I didn't know what to say. Do you still believe that you can understand someone through just a few lines of text in a couple of chapters? I couldn't reply. I wasn't sure why. It could be because I thought that I had no right to answer him, or maybe I couldn't find the correct words to say. 999 quietly studied the indecisive me, before shooting me a criticizing glare. He then pulled some things out from a drawer attached to the table, to throw them at me. I heard that you like to read. Maybe, reading that might help you. That book is written for the purpose of understanding the fear of the unknown by foolish humans like you. What, 999, threw at me were several books. I picked one of them up to take a look. A brief overview of outer gods, regarding the secretive plotter and the most ancient dream. Chapter 421. The Secretive Plotter. Part 6. This was a book written by the Recorder of Fear. The recorders of fear, the very first humans to encounter the outer gods, and the writers who also spread the word on their existences. Exclusive skill, reading comprehension, is activating. Exclusive attribute, scenario interpreter, is activating. I couldn't help but feel my anticipation grow after seeing the book's title. To think, this would be a story regarding the secretive plotter and the most ancient dream. The plotter often brought up this most ancient dream, so I hoped that this could be an important opportunity to learn more about that thing. I didn't even notice that 999 had disappeared by then, all my being focused on reading this book. Asterisk. Exactly 8 hours later, I closed the book's cover, my face one of pure stupefaction. This? I knew of a perfect expression to describe this sort of book. It's even more boring than Ways of Survival. I had no idea who wrote it, but if this book got published in the various platforms of the 21st century, then I was sure of it tanking as badly as the Ways of Survival. Not only was it boring, it was also quite a hard read, too. Just what on earth was it even talking about? However, there was this one thing that I did understand. Which was, there were 5 great outer gods in the expansive, great whole. The living flame that rises up from the east. The master of the sunken island, the calamity of the world in the west. The monarch of the great abyss, the ruler of the northern universe. The king of silver heart, the ruler of the interstellar space in the south. And finally, the great plotter that crawls from the place of nothing. This setup is even cooler than the Ways of Survival. In the context of the things so far, this great plotter moniker seemed to signify the secretive plotter. Actually, there were several interesting parts among the texts related to the plotter himself. A few recorders of fear who had encountered the great plotter came to learn that he was searching for the most ancient dream. Omitted. Those lucky recorders were able to ask the great plotter about the identity of the most ancient dream. It is the beginning of this universe and the master of the gigantic cogwheel. My oldest mortal enemy and my parent. And the one who decides the end of everything. The few recorders of fear managed to see the great plotter's expression the moment those words were spoken, and they fainted right away. After waking up, they could no longer remember who they were anymore. Records written by a bunch of people who couldn't even remember themselves? Was that why the author of this book was simply stated as a recorder of fear, instead? I wanted to read more about either the great plotter or the most ancient dream, but the majority of the book didn't contain records of those two, but rather, a collection of boring anecdotes related to the general overview of the outer gods, instead. Even the plot development was all over the place. Quite often, a story would end abruptly without warning just as it was getting interesting, or the sequence of events would be jumbled up even within the anecdote itself and made it utterly impossible to make heads or tails of it. I wasn't just talking about one story here, but every single one of them, so I just couldn't get immersed within the book at all. What an interesting story. It was none other than simulation who decided to butt in. Which part was interesting to you? This book has been deliberately engineered this way. Are you saying that it was written deliberately to be boring? The message this story wishes to convey is quite clear. If the author wanted to convey a message, then he should have written it in a way that others could understand. It's written with the idea that those who can't understand it will not. Pardon? I thought I heard a light sigh, and then tiny sparks danced in front of my eyes. The power leaking out from the fourth wall flipped through the pages of the book and began extracting several paragraphs. And once those seemingly disparate paragraphs, taken from different short stories, were connected, they formed the following lines of texts. Emotions passed down from the distant, remote universe. That is the flow of the ancient times that this writer could never follow after. We were terrified. They were like monsters from a universe we couldn't recognize. This fear didn't stem from what we could predict. This was pure terror emanating from those that we could never understand. With great difficulty, we assigned names to each of those terrors. We wanted to pretend that, by assigning names to the creatures of the unknown, we'd be able to understand them. Only now did it feel like the message this book wished to convey was revealing itself. Of course, whether our attempt has any meaning or not, only they can decide. After reading that resignation-filled paragraph, I thought I could see why the outer gods ridiculed these recorders of fear so much. All those modifiers attached to them, strictly speaking, didn't reflect their original essence. If you, the reader, meet them someday, remember this. The one who stares into the abyss will have no choice but to either go mad or become the abyss itself. Having finished my second read-through, I closed the book while feeling despondent. I've gained pretty much nothing here. In the end, there was only one thing I got to figure out from this book. Outer gods are unfathomable creatures. Those were some pretty irresponsible words, that's for sure. Such words could be applied to just about anybody, not only to the outer gods, now couldn't they? Yu Yunghyak is an unfathomable creature. Han Suyang is an unfathomable creature. You could say something like that and it'd still fit the context. Even if it was not an outer god, it was true that we couldn't fully understand each other. We might feel like we could, but that was nothing more than a momentary delusion on our part. Some time ago, I had a conversation with Zhang Haiyang regarding this topic. The devourer of dreams, silently listening to my thoughts, began cackling away. You're correct. That's the message this book wishes to convey. In the end, we are all simply outer gods to each other. I put the book down and looked outside the window. It was circular-shaped, just like the circular room it was in. Sunlight poured in faintly. I spotted the outer gods enjoying the sunbath in between the forest's dense foliage. Some of them discovered me and waved their tentacles about. As if I was looking at a scary scene from a fairy tale or something, I continued to stare at those tentacles. It could very well be that their outer appearance didn't reflect their true nature. Now that I took a closer look, their movements seemed to be rather graceful, too. Only those who reach out can discover the truth. Maybe, there was no need for me to read that book from the get-go. Well, outer gods were everywhere in this place, weren't they? I sneakily observed my surroundings for a bit, before activating miniaturization to slip outside the window. I floated up and approached one of the outer gods. It also extended its tentacle towards me. I didn't sense hostility behind that action. I diant kari if yo you reg reddit. Even after the fourth wall warned me, I still reached out towards that tentacle. I always regretted about something in my life. However, my regret over the things I hadn't done was way bigger than for those that I did do. Exclusive skill, reading comprehension, is activating. The very last scenario of this star stream was a great war against the outer gods. And through that war, the outer gods would disappear from this world. They were the only creatures in the ways of survival without any detailed explanation. I wanted to ask them. Ask them just where they came from. Ask them for what purpose they were fighting against the star stream. Not even once during the original story did the outer gods reply to those questions. They only roared on, or spat out incomprehensible utterances, and fought against the constellations. That was all. Suchuchuchuchu. The fourth wall is warning you. I grasped the outer god's tentacle. As if it was responding to my touch, the tentacle wrapped around my hand like a tree's vine. The recorder of fear said this. They said that the outer gods were unfathomable, unexplainable existences. They said that no one knew where they came from or what their real identity was. They could be right. My current actions might be completely meaningless. We might end up fighting each other later, like how it was in the original storyline, and bring forth the wretched destruction and ruination to all. Suddenly, my surroundings seemed to be blanketed by a slow-moving melody. Under the brilliant sunlight, outer gods were, one by one, bowing their heads in my direction. Fable, the one who is loved by all, has begun its storytelling. Tiny flowers began blooming on the vines created by the outer gods, as if they were giving me their precious hidden something. Fragrance wafted out from those flowers, soon becoming lyrics to a song. And afterwards, it formed a story. Captain. It was a fragment of a very old memory. Yu Yunghyak SSI. I listened to those voices like an entranced man. They belonged to different people, but I could accurately guess the owners of those voices with my eyes closed. I had been thinking about this for a long while. If the secretive plotter was Yu Hyuk from the original story, and just like what he had shown me, if the countless world lines of the ways of survival existed out there, then the innumerable failed stories within those regression turns, just where would they have ended up in? In the next life, without a doubt. Even if you regress many more times, I'll always accompany you, Captain. The surging waves of memory swept me up in an instant. These memories lacked any obvious starting point, and they were not consistently linked to each other, either. However, I was able to follow them. As if I was connecting the constellations that couldn't be connected previously. Perhaps only I was able to connect them in this world. And in that moment, I understood. I understood what the outer god was, why Yu Hyuk from the original story had to become one willingly. And why he had no choice but to become the secretive plotter. The story of pain that went on for tens of thousands, hundreds, maybe even for millions of years. Stories discarded by the world line and couldn't be acknowledged as fables. And the fragments of fables that became the subconsciousness of the worlds, drifting around in the universe and ruminating on the ancient memories. Finally, the voices of those that were not saved. Boo-hoo. Branches of the outer god, enveloping my surroundings like a garden, began expanding. I couldn't take my eyes off these memories, even though it felt as if I'd asphyxiate from the crashing waves of them. Please, remember us. I grabbed hold of the fables crumbling away at my touch and began sobbing. These were simply far too precious. And I felt uncontrollable sorrow now that no one remembered them. I could neither understand or change this. All I could do, whether it was back then or now, was to simply read them. Outer gods began screeching out all at the same time. Yuknawus 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 yuknawus, waryu 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 waryu. The vines began tightening around me. I heard sobbing noises coming from the outer gods. It sounded like they were happy. Or maybe, sad. It was the ancient cry resonating from the distant other side of the universe. Told you not to do it. Outer gods rushing towards me soon formed a dense, impenetrable forest. Vines grew and grew, choking me harder and tighter as if to swallow me whole. As if they wanted to accept me as one of them. As if they wanted me to join them and stay forever. I somehow managed to regain my wits and struggled hard to get out of there while pushing the vines away. Unfortunately, the more I did that, the tighter their restrictions became. Don't go, how come? I couldn't afford to get devoured here. If I really wanted what's best for them, then I must not faint here. Can't go. Even before I could unsheath the unbreakable faith, both of my arms were sealed off. Just as I was about to get helplessly dragged into the darkness of the vines, blinding rays of light split them apart. It was a mini, heaven-shaking sword, visible under the faint sunlight. I raised my head to find the Koma Yu Hyuk number, 999, glaring at me. You bastard, what have you done? Chapter 422. The Secretive Plotter. Part 7. Just what the hell happened back there? Bai Hyung hung his head low after hearing Han Suyong's words. You were busy talking a big game, but then, we got refused entry at the door. Oh Dakibi, will you say something already? Well, that is... Fu. In the end, the Kim Dokja company couldn't go to the final scenario and had to return to Earth. The reason? Their qualification is insufficient. It seems that the great Dakibis were behind this. You think everything will be fine after saying that? What will you do about our wasted time, dude? I'll compensate you with suitable rewards, so please, stop grilling me. While the grumbling Bai Hyung was rummaging through his pockets, Han Suyong sighed deeply and took a look at her companions. They had somehow returned to Earth after going through all sorts of crazy ups and downs. Predictably, none of them were themselves at the moment. He might have died for real this time. I'm sorry, Hyung. I wasn't qualified. Because I didn't do the contract. Gillian had been muttering some indescribable things to himself while crouching over there, while Shin Yu-sung had her eyes closed and both of her index fingers were pressed to her temples as if she was meditating or some such. Meanwhile, Ji-hai and Jang Hui-won had taken Hyun-sung to Aileen at the industrial complex, and had vacated the premises for the time being. This place hasn't changed at all. That Ajumma didn't even bother to clean the house, did she? Han Soo-young muttered to herself as she patted away the dust on the aged couch. Once upon a time, she, Yu Sang-ah, and Lee Soo-jaeong stayed together in this very house. A place where they lived together for 3 years during Kim Dok-ja's absence. Her brief reminiscence was cut short by the doorbell. She utilized the black flame to remotely open the door and smirked to herself. I guess the devil showing up when you talk about her could be a fable as well. It's been a while, Soo-young-ah, said Lee Soo-jaeong as she scanned the messy state of the house. She eventually shook her head. You're still the same as before. You should at least ventilate the place. I'll have you know, I've returned only just now. And it's already been so many years. Han Soo-young flinched when she got that far. She might have spent dozens of years in the Isle of Reincarnators, but that was time spent within the island itself. She couldn't really tell exactly how long it had been on the outside. Lee Soo-jaeong opened all the windows in the house with a simple flick of her hand and sent away all the stuffy dust outside. Her eyes remained fixed on the group sagging on the floor in the meantime. Han Soo-young sneakily blocked the older woman's view towards them and coughed to clear her throat, before asking a question. By any chance, did Jang Hui-won tell you already? Tell me what? Han Soo-young lightly bit her lip. She wasn't sure how to explain this situation. Well, you can see that Kim Dok-ja isn't here. That's true. I learned of it just now, too. She thought that maybe she shouldn't have brought it up, but it was spilt milk already. Han Soo-young squeezed her eyes shut and spoke. The reason why he's not here, it's me, Yu Young-hyuk and Jang Hui-won. We all wanted to save your son and tried to go with the Soul's one big hit, but... Please get to the main point. Actually, Ajumma, your son's gone to some place with someone. But that place is... Are you perchance speaking of that? Han Soo-young followed Lee Soo-jaeong's pointing finger and turned her head. The TV mounted on the wall was playing a news footage. The scene on the screen showed a man wearing a white coat floating in the jet black sky, with Kim Dok-ja dangling off that man's arm. Breaking news! Kim Dok-ja Company's president kidnapped. Han Soo-young's jaw dropped to the floor as she muttered softly. What the heck is that? For some unfathomable reason, the Earth's media had found out about that event. Lee Soo-jaeong and her rather relaxed expression stared at the screen for a little while, then she nodded her head. That boy. He's still so popular. Ajumma? Don't you get that it's a pretty serious problem? But, he looks like Yu Young-hyuk gun. So, what can be a serious problem? TL note at the end. Because, that's not the Yu Young-hyuk. That's the problem. Han Soo-young spat out a groan. But then, the TV screen suddenly rewound itself back and the exact same footage played out again. Breaking news! Kim Dok-ja Company's president kidnapped. She looked around wondering what was going on here, only to discover the stupefied Yu Young-hyuk continually poking the TV remote. He rewound the footage several times and repeated it over and over again. Han Soo-young asked him, Hey, are you alright? You won't regress even if you rewind that, you know? Did you even forget how to go back now? He didn't even pretend to hear her. His eyes burned scarily as if he wanted to engrave the appearance of the secretive plotter in them. The status of the regressor who refused to accept his defeat oozed out from him and made the air in the living room rather stuffy and hot. Han Soo-young spat out an even greater groan. Damn it. Just who the heck distributed that footage? Hum. She turned her head yet again to find Bae-hyun this time, coughing to clear his throat. You haven't left yet? Here's your reward. Now that she thought about it, she had forgotten all about the reward payout. She extended her hand out, and the Dakibi's small hand placed 500 coins on her palm. Are you messing with me? Well, the thing is, the financial state of the Bureau's Seoul branch is a bit strained lately, you see. And what with all these many things that require our attention, it's like. Baihyung whistled while glancing at the other side of the sky. The Seoul sky, that should have been clear, was now dyed in the ominous colors of crimson and yellow. There were probability sparks lashing down like lightning bolts, as well as the pitch-black, great hole, swirling around viciously. Han Soo-young frowned deeply and asked. Did something happen to Seoul? The skies have been like that for a while now. This city was no longer the location for the main scenario. But, if the apocalyptic phenomena were still persisting like that, it's because of the apocalypse dragon. Baihyung looked at the sky with a bitter expression, pulled out a lengthy smoking pipe from his inner pocket and mouthed it. Perhaps she found that sight unacceptable. Han Soo-young snatched the pipe away and yelled at the Dakibi. What are you talking about? Why does the apocalypse dragon's effect reach this far? You don't know? I thought Kim Dokja would have told you already. That idiot never tells us the most important information. Baihyung pulled out a second smoking pipe, looking rather unperturbed, and spoke while lighting it up. The revival of the apocalypse dragon is the first button of the great annihilation for all of us. You can think of it as the world line now rushing towards its end with that thing wide awake. This was why I told you that we need to hurry to the final scenario. What will happen if we don't get to the final scenario? As the word implies, it's the apocalypse. You, me, this world. That composed declaration prompted the dumbfounded Han Soo-young to sharply shoot back. What the heck, what is even? What's the point of this final scenario when the whole world is about to be destroyed? Why did you people even create such a scenario in the first place? The Great Annihilation is not a scenario planned out by the Dakibis. It's simply meant to be. And because the annihilation is real, the final scenario has gained its purpose at last. Baihyung looked up at the distant skies with an expression of remorse. He saw the movements of a group of stars, hurriedly trying to get to some place. Stars of the heavens were getting further away like shooting stars. Asterisk. Oh. The outer gods unleashed their jet-black statuses, dyeing the entirety of the Nyas forest in pure darkness. The Koma Yu Young Hyoks managed to extract me from the vines and quickly stood all around me. The Koma number, 999, spoke up first. Protect Kim Dokja. I told all of you this before, didn't I? I knew he would cause a problem. Indeed, we should have killed him the first time we saw him. Even though they spat out some seriously scary words, all of the mini Yu Young Hyoks continued to hold their heaven-shaking swords firmly and didn't lower their guards. They sliced and cut the approaching tentacles and advanced forward little by little. Maybe because it was directly after witnessing something truly shocking, my entire body seemed to be wrapped in this cold air. The Koma number, 999, took off his black coat and placed it over my shoulders. I only remember telling you to read a book, so why did you have to provoke them? I wasn't sure what I could say back to him here. 999's eyes trembled. You fool. Oh. The howling outer god's true voice reverberated heavily in the sky. Insects within the forest vomited out their bodily fluids and died, while some of the gods even began fighting among themselves, too. 999 spoke in a grave tone of voice. These beings have not been understood for a very long time. And you just had to get involved. Outer gods were flooding into where we were. Giptome. Kim Dokja. What was even more concerning, though, was the fact that not all outer gods carried the same sentiments as their peers. A few of the higher-ranked ones, after sensing my presence, began to exude unfiltered animosity in my way. Stinkying constellation has low OK down on us. Ki ll him get our ID of HM. No FO we're giving even if YOU are PLO TERSGUST. Step aside, members of the Shantak. We will cut you down if you come closer. The Koma Yu Young Hyoks all unleashed their statuses and resisted, but the outer gods didn't back down at all. They approached closer one step at a time, and while emitting dizzying statuses themselves, cried out in a loud roar. Oh, PL Otter. We can no lo ing or what? F or ho w long do we need to what? The wa rldlin's end is ap pro aching. I knew very well what they were talking about. The world line's end. Even these guys, as expected, were fully conscious of the final scenario. Th is wa rld mu st understand us. Step aside. The tentacles closing in grew even more ferocious. Eventually, their statuses became simply too much for the Koma Yu Young Hyoks to deal with, but then the forest parted ways, and he made his entrance. He walked forward while crossing the tentacles that none of us could block. Each of his steps contained the solitude of indescribable eternity, as well as the entirety of the 1,863 lives he had experienced. Once upon a time, his name was Yu Young Hyok, but now, he was the secretive plotter. A man who knew of every world line's sorrow. Outer gods knelt down in front of that absolute, overwhelming nobleness. Oh, the great PL Otter. However, not all of them did. There were some gods who didn't want to bend their opinions even when subjected to the intense pain of their existences turning into nothingness. Oh, the great PL Otter, we can no lo ing or what? The ones no one could ever understand were wailing in sorrow. They raged on, and they mourned. Even then, their rage and sorrow were not understood. They didn't belong to this world line, and they couldn't be understood through the existing fables. One needed to work really hard to understand their rage, their sorrow, and their grief. We want to be understood. We w and to become fa bless. Stories that needed one to work hard to understand could never be fables. Stories that needed one to throw oneself deeply in first couldn't be consumed. The secretive plotter opened his lips. You will not be understood. He looked at each and every one of them with subtle gazes, studied them, and gifted them with the cruel reality. That is because this star stream has labeled all of you terrors. Because this world has described you all as chaos that destroys the order, as calamities that could never be understood. That is why. It was then I finally understood why the secretive plotter has chosen to side with these creatures. Why would a person who knows the end of everything repeat the same story over again? When I thought about it, the answer was a rather simple one. That's because he didn't like the end he witnessed. In the original story, Yu Young Hyok and Constellations defeated the outer gods together. That's how he got to the end of the scenarios, and destroyed the star stream. You will never shine in the sky like the constellations, nor can you become the main actors of this world. As long as the star stream exists, you will all remain forever as outer gods. However, he didn't find what he wanted. And now, after becoming the secretive plotter, Yu Young Hyok was stepping up to the battlefield once more. Soon, the war of annihilation will commence. The end of everything will soon begin, where stars will fall, worlds will collapse, and all fables will be extinguished. I spotted the eyes of the secretive plotter looking at me from afar. The eye of sage spun around within his pitch-black iris. Oh, the great plotter. Oh, woohoo. According to the plot of the original story, these creatures would meet with defeat. For the sake of the conclusion Kim Dokja wishes for, these beings simply had to be defeated. Star Stream would be destroyed, while the stars of the heavens and the solitary gods would die with no one to remember them. The defeated would die extremely sorrowful deaths, while the victors would not get to bask in their victory. I began walking towards the secretive plotter. Kim Dokja? I heard 999 call out to me, but I didn't look back. I undid the miniaturization, and my eye level changed rapidly. The black coat, 999, placed on my shoulders, wavered along with every step I took. Starstream's probability is now shifting. Stream of the great main scenario is now dwelling in you. Past the canopy of the vine-covered forest, the sea of stars of the star stream could be seen. On one side of the sky, stars were emitting bright light, while on the other side, ominous-looking galaxies alongside the Great Hole were quietly flowing about. Half of it, light, while the other half, darkness. Soon, the final war would begin. And most likely, I would have to stand on one of the sides to witness the end of the world. Your second modifier has been decided. A small star flickered on the far side of the sky. I stared at it for the longest time, before slowly reverting my gaze back to the ground. The outer gods were now looking at me. I returned their gazes, and finally chose the side I'd stand. Your second modifier is the Watcher of the Light and Darkness.